Thank you. I'm so looking forward to this conversation with two of my favorite lawyers. And I love the optics here on this stage. Three women of color who succeeded in the law, a profession that still continues to be dominated by white males. What wasn't mentioned in the bio is that all three of us are mothers, and I am a grandmother of 5. Zakia Norton and Samita Basu founded the law firm, Norton Basu. The firm specializes in probate and estate planning. And we're going to talk about their journey into the law, why they decided to form their law firm, the challenges they encountered and overcame, and we're going to talk about estate planning, what it is, and what everyone in this room needs to know and needs to have, which is an estate plan. Now, this is the California Probate Code. Not counting the index, it is 610 pages long. Anything you ever wanted to know about wills, trusts, guardianships, conservatorships, and estate planning is in this book, the California Probate Code. Now, I especially love the section on the rule in this book against perpetuities. I'm going to read you a section from the Probate Code. You ready? If, in measuring a period from the creation of a trust or other property arrangement, language in a government instrument 1 seeks to disallow the vesting or termination of any interest or trust beyond 2, seeks to postpone the vesting or termination of any interest or trust until, or 3, seeks to operate in effect in any similar fashion upon the later of A, the expiration of a period of time not exceeding 21 years after the death of the survivor in a specified lives and being at the creation of the trust or other property arrangement, or B, the expiration of a period of time that exceeds or might exceed 21 years after the death of the survivor of lives in being at the creation of the trust or other property arrangement. That language is inoperative to the extent it produces a period that exceeds 21 years after the death of the survivor of the specified lives. That's one sentence. So everybody got that? Now, I was the supervising judge of the probate court in Santa Clara County for 2 years, and I didn't get it then, and I still don't get it now. So, which is why we have lawyers like Zakia and Samita who do know their way around the probate code. So let's begin our conversation with a simple yet compound question. Who are you? Where did you grow up? Tell us about your parents, siblings, and describe your journey into the law. Who's going to start?
I'll start.
All right.
Start. So
Make
I'm
sure they can
Samita
hear you.
Basu. I hope you can all hear me.
Okay.
I grew up mostly in Nebraska. I am an immigrant to this country. I came when I was 4 years old. My parents from India. My parents decided that Nebraska would be a great place to raise an Indian woman child, and so that's where I grew up. That was it's an interesting experience. I moved to the East Coast, completed my high school in Maryland, Montgomery County, and from there I went off to college, where quite frankly I didn't do so well. I went to Northwestern in Evanston. Didn't do so well, wasn't very prepared for the freedoms that you get in college as a very protected immigrant child. So then I transferred to a small liberal arts college in New Jersey called William Patterson, and I studied math and had no interest in the law at that time. I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger, currently chief technology officer for a company that builds all the intrusive machines that look at your luggage. That's what he does. My parents are retired and living in Fremont. My mother was a librarian her entire life. Strong love of books and education. My dad was a professor his entire life, so we have no experience in the law or even really in corporate America in my family. My path to the law was very circuitous. As I think with a lot of women, I started off doing one thing and had a lot of stops and starts and restarts and reinvented myself along the way. I started off doing financial analysis for a financial services company in New Jersey. So I worked for Prudential for many years. I decided in my youth and, exuberant amount of love for my future husband that I would move to be with him. So I moved overseas. I moved to India, and I lived there for 3.5 years, got married, moved to Singapore, lived there for an entire decade. It was a 18 to 24-month gig that turned into, 10 years. It was an entire decade. And finally got back to home ground, which is the United States, moved to California, which was my first time living here. And along the way I had...
Back it up. Law school.
Oh yeah, right, law school, yes. So along the way, while I was in Singapore, I was doing more financial analysis kind of work, but as a management consultant for IBM. And I took a break to have my kids. And while I was on this break, I was slowly losing my mind and decided that I should do something to enhance my career once I went back into the workforce. And when my kids were, maybe 2, 3, I figured that's old enough, they're independent, So I have 2 kids and 2 sons, and they were born exactly 2 years apart. So by the time I was pregnant with the second one, I was pretty out of it. I was definitely losing my mind. So I decided to go back to school, and instead of doing an MBA, which is what would have probably fit with the career I was doing at the time, I said, hey, I'm really interested in the law. Let's go to law school. And all of my friends, including my friend Steph, who is here today, said to me, oh, you have lost your mind. I was pregnant and doing law school remotely.
In Singapore.
I was in Singapore doing law school remotely with a Los Angeles-based law school, getting up at 4:30 and 5 in the morning to attend classes online. I flew in to take exams. I flew in to take the bar exam. I flew into Pasadena, spent a week there, tried not to fall asleep during what was the old school 3 days of testing,
That's
not the
correct.
2 days that it
That's
is
right.
now.
For real lawyers.
Real lawyers, yeah. When we had to walk uphill both ways to get to the bar exam. Yeah.
Obviously.
And so I took the bar exam while I was living in Singapore. I passed the first time. And I went back to Singapore and worked with a local firm there that had an association with a global firm called Denton's, which is really big overseas, and worked on some really boring stuff. And then I pretty much drew a hard line in the sand with my then husband and said, I need to go home. So we moved here, he got a job here, we moved here, and then I met Zakia pretty much a couple of months after I moved here, and then that's a whole different part of the
That's a
story.
different, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I have never lived overseas.
Is the mic picking
I
up?
don't, yeah, can everybody hear me though?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Can everybody hear me better there?
No.
This is just, okay.
Mic.
Okay. Well, it is, but, all right.
We'll do it this way. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I actually was born and raised in Milpitas, California, back when I would say Milpitas and people would say, what? Yeah, so then I would say San Jose. My parents decided to come to California, thank goodness. Neither of them was really from this area. And so I grew up in Milpitas, knew everybody since kindergarten all the way through, one of those things. So naturally, the minute I graduated from high school, I was like, I am out of here. So I actually went to college in upstate New York, where I did walk uphill both ways in the snow to go to school, and really came to appreciate California. So after I graduated there, I majored in political science. I decided I'm coming back to California. So I did, and I was working, and still at that time didn't really know what I wanted to do. Was actually thinking MBA track as well. And believe it or not, actually happened to go to a Black Expo, and somebody there at one of the tables just said, have you ever thought about going to law school? And I said, well, I mean, I guess. So that's kind of how I applied. The funny thing about that is that leading up to this, my whole life, everybody has told me that I should be doing something like being a lawyer because, I like to argue, I have a strong opinion, and I actually interned for a judge while I was in college.
And still didn't think about law school.
Still wasn't necessarily thinking about law school. I know, it's a little insane. It's one of those things where everybody knew it long before I did. So I finally got there though, applied, got in, and I went to University of Pacific McGeorge, so up in Sacramento. which is really great. It was really hot though. And then I left there and actually moved to Las Vegas, following a husband at the time as well, as we do. And I took the bar there and worked for 3-4 years, and then decided I needed to get back to California. Had my daughter, and I was like, well, we need to be near the grandparents because that's where the babysitting is. So came back and then had to take another bar exam. So I took the California bar exam while I still had my daughter, who was very young at the time. So I couldn't really even study as much as I would like, but I passed. You know, much like Samita had figured out that, you know, I didn't want to go back to the big law firm life. And so I was trying to figure out what was next. And, you know, we'll get to that story after we met and where everything took off.
Do we have any lawyers in the audience here? Any lawyers?
Okay.
This one. So for those who might not know, the bar exam, I mean, it's the worst experience ever. And California and New York have the toughest bar exams. So you go in with no notes, and back in the day, and before any of you all probably were even born, it's 3 days of just writing responses to essay questions, and then you have a day of multiple choice. A day of doing that, and they've added things now. There's an ethics part. I mean, this is no small thing. So to pass the bar remotely, you're studying from Singapore, and you fly in with 2 children to pass the bar, switching, you know, gears and then coming in. It's no small feat. So, you know, kudos to both of you. So the next question is, how did Samita and Zakia meet?
I'll take on part of this, and then you can jump in.
Okay.
So, yeah, you had come back here from Singapore. I was coming back from Las Vegas and didn't want to go back to big law firm life. Decided, though, we couldn't just sit on our hands. So both, unbeknownst to each other, had decided to sign up to do some pro bono work for a legal aid organization down in Santa Clara, or San Jose, Bay Area Legal Aid. And both just happened to, I guess, have that thought independently, but at the same time, and get placed in the same unit. And you have to tell about the first day, about what we
So
did.
the first day, so I had done a little bit of research. I mean, this was a volunteer position, but they made us interview for these positions, and it was
Ridiculous.
3 days a week, full time. So 9 to 5, 3 days a week, and this was volunteer. So, and the commitment was for a minimum of 3 months. So, you know, I go in my suit and I interview, and then they said, well, we have some other people who are joining, and they told me Zakia's name. So I went on LinkedIn and I looked her up. So it's called research. And so I had been doing, you know, corporate work. So that's basically sitting in an office reading contracts. You know, I'm not in court at one. That's not what I was doing in Singapore. I look up Zakia and she's a litigator. She goes to court, and I was like, oh no, she's gonna know immediately that I don't know what I'm doing, you know, because the position was actually to go to court and represent people who were being evicted from their homes. And I was like, well, I've never stepped into a court except for traffic court. And so I was like, she's gonna know I'm a fraud. And so the first day of training, we both show up, and you know, I'm kind of not really sure exactly what's happening, like what's going on, what's her vibe like, and she starts making little comments and jokes during the training, like she does, yeah. And I started realizing, I'm like, oh, she's really smart and funny. I could really get along with her.
Well, and by the way, when we first started, Samita looked nothing like this. So I think maybe in the program, though, right? It has a picture that's, yeah, her hair was longer. She was dressed all, you know, like conservative. And I'm like, she's going to hate me, you know, because I'm so just, the opposite of that.
Yeah, so we kind of were like, okay, well, so we were kind of still feeling each other out, and they said, we're putting both of you in the same department, and they put our desks next to each other. And so this was the first time I'd ever met her, and this was October 31st, I remember the date exactly, and that's when we started our training. They put our desks together, and that was it.
The beginning of the end.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah. There was a lot of asking us to keep it down.
Yeah.
And to stop having, like, why are you having so much fun?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And so but there was one case that was sort of a turning point where we really realized that not only did we like each other, but we kind of approached the law the same way. So she was actually having to go to jail, right, to actually interview somebody.
Yes.
The case was turning on. This guy was mentally ill, and he had committed an act at his mother's residence And it was, did he actually live there or not? Because if he didn't live there, right, this was like a guest that had done it, versus if he lived there, then the mom was gonna lose her benefits and she was gonna get evicted as well. So they go to the court, she goes with this attorney, yes, who,
Went to jail.
we had a really great nickname for her last year, but she goes with her, and you know, this attorney proceeds to ask a bunch of questions, none of which were really maybe getting at that issue. And so then you had the opportunity to ask a question, and that was, you asked them, what did you ask them?
I asked her, I said, where do you get your mail?
There you go. So she came back to the office and she was telling me all about this case and about being in prison. Because when you go in there as a lawyer, by the way, they just open the doors and then they're like, okay, bye. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, like I want somebody, like I want to hold your hand. Yeah. So they just let you go. So she comes back, so she's telling me about that, and we're joking, and then she says, you know, what would you do? Like, how would you ask this question? I'm like, well, where do you get your mail? She was like, oh my God. So that was basically what we knew, and it wasn't long after that that I turned to her one day and just said, have you ever thought about going out on your own? And her eyes just got big, and she was like, yes. And I think 3 weeks later, we were out on our own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick up from there. So back in the day, after I graduated from Stanford Law School, this was in the mid-1970s, I was the only African-American woman in my class. And I started my own law practice in East Palo Alto because I could not get hired by any of the corporate law firms anywhere in the Silicon Valley, and that's where all the money is, right? And I had school loans to pay off, college and law school loans. So fast forward now some 30 years to when you two formed Norton Basu, formed a law office, 2 women of color, in a field of law, probate, estate planning, that most lawyers of color in which do not practice. What were you two thinking? That's the first question. And tell us why you decided to go into law practice together. And I'm guessing there were a couple of challenges along the way, so you might want to talk to us about that too.
Well, I'm definitely to blame for why we went into estate planning. For some reason, it was just something that I've always been interested in. I mean, I was actually a child, like asking my parents about a 401k and what does that mean and how does it work. Yet you're the math person, so I don't understand. So I kind of knew that that was going to be the area that I ultimately was going to go in if I was going to start something on my own. And then I didn't really have to do much talking you into it, though.
No, I think what I had realized at that time was that, you know, at the age that I'm quite a bit older than Zakia, so I've had quite a few careers, and I was really done taking orders from other people. I was just tired of it. I didn't want to do it anymore, you know, and I was like, I just want to do it the way I feel like it should be done. And I think in what we do, I think it's extraordinarily important because there's a lot of room to blur the lines, and there are a lot of people out there who do that and are not necessarily abiding by bright line ethical rules in their practice, and we do. And I didn't want anybody to tell me not to do that just in order to, you know, have revenue. And I know that that's a big thing. Being a lawyer, being on your own is not that easy, but I wanted to have a partner that had thought the same as I did, and I just knew instinctively that Zakia was going to be that person.
And I think the decision to go out on our own was actually born a lot from necessity, in that, you know, even though we were working full time, right, or we're going to be, we're still the default parents, right? We still have the kids, so we need the flexibility in order to go to soccer practice and taekwondo and whatever else they're interested in at any given moment, right? So we had to figure out a way to do what we wanted to do, but also be able to leave work at the time that we wanted to, right? And so, I mean, still true today, but gosh, in the beginning, it was like, you know, getting off work at 3:30, running around doing the kids thing, and then her and I are back chatting and texting and doing work from like 8 to 10, you know, because you got to do it, you got to get in where you fit in, right? When you're first starting out, especially.
I mean, I think that was really important for both of us. You know, I was like, I was too old when I had my kids. I was like, I want to at least see them once in a while. And that wasn't a thing that was going to happen if I was going to go back to a law firm. That's just not the way law firms work.
Yeah, and the challenges we faced are, I mean, probably the same that I think women face, but especially women of color, as you know, in this field, which is, you know, being asked are you a lawyer? Being asked in court, being asked when you walk into a room where there's depositions, are you the court reporter? The court reporter sits over here. those kinds of things, not knowing anything, just based on, So I think we encounter that now, especially in this field, because it is pretty dominated by older white men, that they're not used to seeing us in those spaces. So it's pretty obvious that we're the only chocolate chips in the cookie when we go into those rooms.
So I want you to talk about one other experience that you told me about. But by the way, they're both single moms now, so they have, just the responsibilities are huge. And I eventually was a single mom as well. I have 2 daughters, now well grown. So remember you told me about a case where a lawyer asked you to do something. Can you recall? So again, and I wanted to tell you this because it's an experience that I promise you no other lawyers, for example, white male lawyers, would ever be asked to do.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So we had an experience with a client that was, difficult would be an understatement, would be a generous way of describing it. We had gotten pretty far through it was trust administration, right? I don't think it was probate, it was trust administration. And it was one of the moments where what they want you to do is just not something that's actually possible on the planet Earth. And so they didn't understand that. That's the client. So they eventually said, we knew it too. Like we were like, this isn't working, right? It's not you, it's me, but we gotta.
But actually, it's really.
But actually, it's you.
Yeah, it's actually really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think everybody was sort of on the same page, and so they actually went and found another counsel who, by the way, told them exactly what we told them. So much so that attorney called and said, "I said the same thing you said." But because that attorney wasn't a person of color, they believed it. So the client believed it, yes. So the client believed it. So then we get a phone call from the new attorney down the line when now it's time to basically settle everything. And so now it's time for all the bills to be looked at. And we got a call and they said, hey, can you reduce your fee? Can you reduce what you guys have already done? Can you reduce it? And it was an egregious amount that they were asking us to drop it.
They wanted us to take 30 cents on the dollar.
Yeah. It was one of those moments where you're sitting there and it just feels surreal. Like you can't believe what's actually happening. And we called you. I was like, we got to call the doors. And we just said, because this was actually the first time I think that we'd actually had to have a client go with somebody else and it just didn't work out. And so we didn't know if this was something that happens or if this was unique to our experience. And of course, Doris, do you want to share what you?
Yeah. I called Ladores, and before I could even finish telling her the story, she was like, no.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Just a lot of no's.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So then I realized, okay, this is not standard.
Okay, yeah, this is not standard. Yeah. This is because of who we are. And so we had to go to bat. And we said, absolutely not. We did the work. We're not, we understand the position you're in. The client's unreasonable, but you took on that case. So you're going to have to deal with it. Yeah.
And we got paid.
You got paid.
Yeah, we got paid.
So what is the importance of, first of all, let's go back to what exactly is estate planning? What does it mean to have an estate plan?
So an estate plan, what it consists of can be different things for different people, but an estate plan is basically a set of legal documents that are going to protect you while you are alive, as well as when you pass away. And it's about managing your assets if you are incapacitated during your lifetime, as well as how to distribute your assets the most efficiently and in the way that you want, to whom you want, without any court interference, so not, very limited involvement with this probate code. And so you can do that privately and quickly after you're gone. And so that's what an estate plan basically does.
Right, and the pieces in that estate plan are going to be a will, a revocable living trust, your advanced healthcare directive, and your power of attorney for financial matters.
So what is the importance of estate planning?
It's a good question. I think the importance is some of it is for yourself, but a lot of it is for your friends and loved ones, because no matter what, they're going to have to go through something once you're no longer here in order to move any assets you have, right, from your name to their name. So either the state is going to do that for you, and we don't want the state doing any of those things for us, right? They're inefficient, they're expensive, and might not be what you want. So this is your opportunity to say to your loved ones, hey, I thought about this. I thought about you. I thought about what I want. I don't want you to have to guess, and I don't want you to have to go to court and spend 2 years and thousands of dollars, and by the way, probably fighting with people who want to get in on that. I thought about all of that. So I planned, and I set everything up. So all you have to do is pick up the phone, call Smeed and Zakia, and they're going to walk you through everything, and you're done in 3 to 6 months instead of 2 to 3 years.
Also, additionally, if you end up not doing an estate plan and end up under the probate where you have to go to court, it's all public. Everybody in the world gets to know everything about you, your life, and everything you have. If you do an estate plan, that doesn't happen. It stays private. And I think that's very, very important for a lot of people. So, Aretha Franklin, Prince, Abraham Lincoln, Jimi Hendrix, Martin Luther King Jr. Now, what they all have in common is they died without wills or any estate plans. So my question is what's up with that? Why don't people plan for the future? What's the reluctance?
I think a lot of people think that they don't have an estate. So they're like, oh, I don't have an estate. I don't have a big house, or my house, I only have like $100,000 in equity in my house, so it doesn't matter. First of all, everybody has an estate. Whatever you own is the definition of an estate. So anything you own in your name, that's your estate. And when you die, the court and the law looks at the fair market value of your estate. They don't look at what is the net equity in any of your investments or your estate. They look at what was the fair market value of everything that you own on the date that you died. So even if you own a $2 million house and you had a $1.8 million mortgage, your estate is now worth $2 million. They don't care about the $1.8 mortgage. So all the fees and all the costs and everything is going to be based on $2 million, not $200,000. So I think people are confused about what an estate is, but I think a deeper, maybe more emotional issue might be the fact that people just don't want to talk about not being here.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think about, right? It's not the most pleasant thing, but it's one of those things where once you've done it, there is sort of a peace of mind that you do get to have, that okay, no matter what happens, I'm taken care of. Because sometimes, too, what the law might say for you, right, the people who might be able to act on your behalf, if we're just defaulting to the probate code, that might not be people that we want, right? It could be your mom. Maybe you don't have a great relationship with your mom or your dad or your siblings. We all have that crazy uncle. It's like, do you want that crazy uncle in here? No, you don't. So, you have to make sure that you're thinking about these things and, taking care of it before it's too late.
So what is clear is that estate planning is not just for the rich and the famous. And that's something people think about. And then when you do think about the famous, think about Aretha Franklin. So she didn't have any estate planning. And what I've heard is that there were people within her sphere have said, you need to have a will. And she just didn't want to deal with it. It's too unpleasant. I have to think about dying. Yes. So now you watch. There's going to be a fight. Prince. It's still, Prince, it's kind of working its way through, but it's going to take a lot of time. And then when you think about it, Martin Luther King Jr., no. So, and stuff's happened among the children of Martin Luther King because things were never spelled out. All right, so what happens if you don't have an estate plan?
What happens is the state has one for you. It's called probate. You're in this big, hideous blue book over here. And it's just a really long, drawn-out process. So some inside information for you guys, right? So for every county right now, so Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, Alameda County, San Francisco, there's usually one, sometimes if you're lucky, 2 probate judges. So that's for the entire county. So you can imagine if you need to get on the calendar with that judge, you are looking at months out, and that's for every single hearing that you have to do. And probate is just full of hearings because the court is checking every single thing that you're doing. Sometimes, in some instances, they even have to approve the sale of the house. And during that time, by the way, a lot of the assets are frozen. So if there's still a mortgage on the property and the people that are left behind can't pay that mortgage, that house is gone, right?
Yeah.
So
It doesn't stop the bank from foreclosing.
Oh, you know
The
banks
mortgage
don't
has to
care.
get paid,
Yeah.
whether the person is alive or not.
That's
Yeah.
right. So that's where you end up. And in California, the threshold to get into probate is $150,000. What that means is that if your estate, all the things that you own are worth $150,000 or more, and you don't have a trust, you are in probate. So that means even if you have a will, you are in probate. So it's really not hard to get there here. If you own even 1/65th of some piece of property, you're probably above the $150,000 mark, right? So it's just really easy to get into, and it's the fees, as Smita said earlier, I think you sort of touched on that, are based on the size of the estate. So if it's $1 million house, doesn't matter if your mortgage is 800. They don't care. The fee is calculated on 1 million, and that's the fees that are going to lawyer, the fee that are going to the court, and the fee that's going to the person who's the administrator who's actually working with us to get everything to all of your friends or loved ones or whoever it might be.
I was the probate judge in Santa Clara County for 2 years, and what I can tell you is that my time was taken up with hearings, and it was really family members fighting over the spoils. Very sad, but people's true colors come through when you don't leave a will or you don't have an estate plan. And it was, I got used to it, but it was shocking, just shocking what people were doing to try to get a hold of jewelry and cars and pets and, of course, real estate. So it's just so critical. I know it's hard to think about because you have to think about you're not being here, but it's important. So we're actually coming toward the end of our conversation. And my question to you all is, we heard earlier talk about legacy. You want to leave a legacy. So how do you do that in the context of having an estate plan?
So having an estate plan in and of itself is leaving a legacy of kindness, because you're actually looking out for the people who you are leaving behind. That act in and of itself is an act of kindness, because you have really taken care of them and you've let them have the things that you want them to have in the way that you want them to have them. So there are things you can do within your estate plan if you want to give to a charitable institution, or if you want to encourage certain kinds of behavior in the people who you're leaving things to. There's a lot of flexibility in how you do that, and your values, if being kind, if helping somebody up, reaching back and helping somebody, if those are things that are important to you, you can very easily do that through your estate plan if you do it properly.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the baton analogy that was happening over here earlier, which is, when you pass, right, all of those things, all of your actual tangible items, intangible values, all of those things, they're going to get passed. So either we can pass the baton to the next generation, right, and it can go nice and smooth, we win the race, or it can clatter to the ground, and everyone's trying to figure it out, or sometimes there is no baton and everyone's scattered on the track and nobody knows what's happening, and then they're grieving during that time as well, right? So instead what you can do is think about those values, think about what do you want in that baton and how do you want to pass it, right? What do you want to say to the next generation? I thought about you having to make these decisions. If something happens to me and do I want to stay on life support? Do I not? How do I want to pay for your college if I'm not here? Do I want to have things set up so that you're getting chunks of money at different times? Almost like it would be like if I was still here, I'd be able to do that for you. Do you want to tell them that I thought about these things and I didn't want you to have to make these decisions or try to figure this out when I'm no longer here? So that's really how you leave a legacy of kindness, is you don't have them coming, to us basically and saying, I don't know what she wanted, I don't know where she should be, I don't know how to do any of this.
So if I were sitting in the audience and I did not have an estate plan and I were not a lawyer, one of the questions I had was, how much does this cost to hire someone like you all to get my estate plan done?
So we work on flat fee for our estate planning clients, and our fees include everything. So I'm a notary, I notarize everything, a lot of the documents have to be notarized. We witness everything, we are your witnesses. So oftentimes if there is a dispute, they will ask to reach the witnesses. You need statements from the witnesses when somebody passes, so we serve as the witnesses. And we create everything for you, and we do that on a flat fee of anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000, depending on your particular situation. No nickel and diming, that's it. You pay one fee and you're done. And it's,
Yeah, and we do it that way so that you're not worried about picking up the phone or emailing. It's like point one, it's point two, like how many hundreds of dollars was that just now? So we want everyone to actually understand what's happening. And we've had clients come to us that have done an estate plan before, and we're like, okay, well, what's in your trust? And they're like, I don't even know if I have one. They just put papers down. Nobody took the time to explain it. So part of why we do it that way is that we can actually spend more time with you as well. You can ask all of your questions. And make sure that you actually understand when you leave and you've got our pretty red binder, leather binder, and you're taking it, you can say, oh, I know exactly what's in here, and I know who to send this to, I know, what's going on in any situation. And what I will say, as a caveat, is, the usual probate fee that we get starts at $20,000. So that's the difference in the cost when you're thinking about, what is the value of this? Just keep that in mind.
And I want to stress that probate fees are set by the court. There's a schedule, so it isn't like they're just making it up and saying, oh, I have to have these many $1,000s. That's ordered by the court, depending upon the value of your estate. And that's also money you may have in any accounts. That's another reason why estate planning is so important. And I speak from personal experience because I had my estate plan done by these two. And so think about it. A probate judge, I know who's competent in the field. And who did I pick? I picked these two. And yes, I have my leather binder. Who does that? And everything's in it. And that also means that they said, if I have a question, I have to call back. They're not charging me by the minute because other lawyers do that. They bill. They get their billable. That doesn't happen. So you can tell, you can understand now why I call these two my favorite lawyers. And I adore them because they truly care about their work and they truly care about their clients and the work that they do. And I can attest to this is superb. So Samita and Zakia, I hope that you brought some business cards with you because I'm sure that this audience of smart and caring women want to leave legacies of kindness, and they want to partner with a law firm of two amazing women of color, women taking care of women. Can I get an amen? One other comment I want to make about these two, that in California you have to be a lawyer for at least 10 years before you can become a judge. And I was a judge for 20 years. And I can't think of two better people who, if they decide at some point they want to finish the law practice to move on to the bench, I think you'd be terrific. So just think about that. I want to thank you too for this conversation, and I thank every one of you for listening. Now go forward and plan those estates. Thank you all.